People do not fall for bad systems because they look evil. They fall for them because they sound beautiful. And it always starts with a promise. It always starts with a promise, a very attractive and hard to ignore promise, that the wealth of a few people can be shared with everyone, that the government can handle things better than messy markets, and that no one has to stay poor, hungry, or without health care if the right people take control. This idea has inspired big changes, removed governments, and influenced many smart thinkers over time. People like Karl Marx, Vladimir Lenin, Fidel Castro, and Hugo Chavez truly believed they had found a way to create a fair society, and they all promised equality, success, and freedom from unfair treatment. But in every case, the result was poverty, control, and economic failure. This did not happen because they were evil or their followers were foolish, but because the system itself goes against basic rules that are stronger than politics, the rules of economics. And economics does not care about good intentions, it only reacts to incentives. This is Fiscoria, where every video changes how you see money, history, and the systems around you. If you are new here, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. Do you think socialism can really work? Share your honest opinion below. We read every comment, and this will be interesting. To understand why socialist systems fail, you first need to understand why they sound so convincing, because the idea itself feels very human. In any capitalist country, you can see real problems like rich people who inherited money, workers who work all their lives but retire with little, healthcare that puts families into debt, and housing that becomes too expensive for many. These problems are real, and socialism offers a simple answer. Take from those who have more and give to those who have less, and let the government make sure everyone's basic needs are met. It sounds fair, but reality shows something different. The problem is not the goal sounds good. The problem is how it tries to reach that goal, and inside that method is a major flaw called the calculation problem. In 1920, economist Ludwig von Mises asked a simple question: how does a socialist system decide what to produce? In a market system, prices guide decisions. If prices go up, it means demand is high or supply is low, so producers make more. And if prices drop, it means there is too much supply, so they make less. Millions of people making their own choices are connected through prices, and this helps resources get used properly without anyone controlling everything. But in socialism, the government owns everything, so there are no real prices, and without prices, there is no clear way to know what to produce or how to use resources wisely. The system is basically guessing, and when an entire economy runs on guessing, mistakes grow. Economist Friedrich Hayek explained that knowledge in an economy is spread across millions of people, like farmers, shopkeepers, and workers, and no central authority can collect and use all that information properly. Markets use prices to bring this knowledge together, but socialism removes that system and replaces it with decisions made by officials. This leads to shortages of needed goods, extra production of useless goods, and lower overall value. History shows this clearly. The Soviet Union tried to control everything for over 70 years, deciding what to produce across a huge population, and while it looked strong at first, it slowly failed. Factories made what they were told, not what people needed, and strange results appeared, like making tiny useless nails when told to produce more pieces, or huge useless nails when told to produce by weight. This problem spread across all industries, causing long lines for basic goods. By the 1970s, growth slowed, innovation stopped, and people lost motivation because effort and reward were no longer connected. By 1991, the system collapsed because it could not support itself. Venezuela shows a faster version of the same story. It was once one of the richest countries in its region, with huge oil reserves, but after socialist policies like price controls and nationalization, production dropped because businesses and farmers could not survive under fixed prices. Shortages began, and when oil prices fell, the economy crashed badly, with extreme inflation and millions of people leaving the country. Cuba shows a slower case where the economy did not crash suddenly but stayed stuck. After losing Soviet support, living conditions dropped sharply, but instead of changing the system, controls increased, and even today people struggle with low income and limited opportunities. China shows something different. After major failures under strict socialism, it introduced market changes, allowed private business, and brought back price signals, and the economy grew rapidly, lifting millions out of poverty. This change shows that moving away from strict control helped growth. As another clear example is North and South Korea. Both started with the same people and conditions, but one chose a market system and became wealthy and advanced, while the other stayed controlled and became poor and isolated. These examples show a pattern. Systems that allow private ownership, prices, and incentives create growth, while systems that remove them struggle over time. Even today, when governments increase control, spending, and restrictions too much, similar problems can start to appear slowly. The main lesson is that economic systems depend on incentives, information, and freedom of choice. When these are removed, problems follow, even if the goals sound good. The idea of sharing and fairness is appealing, but history shows that how a system works matters more than what it promises. What makes this even more important is that the failure of these systems is not only about famous leaders, big speeches, or dramatic headlines. It also shows up in ordinary life, in the daily routine of regular people who are just trying to work, eat, raise families, and plan a future. And this is where the story becomes impossible to ignore because economic systems are not judged by slogans. They are judged by what life feels like for normal people. Can a parent find food without standing in line for hours? Can a worker keep enough of what they earn to improve their life? Can a shop owner restock shelves without begging some official for permission? Can a farmer plant more and actually benefit from producing more? Can a student dream about building something, starting something, inventing something, and know that success will be rewarded instead of taken away? These are not small questions. These are the real questions. Because when an economic system breaks, it does not break first in a textbook. It breaks in kitchens, in stores, in factories, in hospitals, in family decisions, in the silent fear people feel when they stop trusting tomorrow. That is why the debate around socialism is never just academic. It is not just about theory. It is about whether a system can handle the complexity of human life better than free exchange, private ownership, and personal incentive can. And over again, when socialists have tried to replace those things with central control, the same painful pattern has appeared. At first, there is excitement. Then there is control. Then there are distortions. Then there are shortages. Then there is fear. Then the people who can leave, leave. And the people who cannot leave are told to be patient, to sacrifice more, to blame enemies, to blame outsiders, to blame sabotage, to blame greed, to blame hoarding, to blame history, to blame sanctions, to blame anyone except the structure of the system itself. But the structure is the story. That is the part people keep trying to ignore. Because once you give the state the power to decide prices, wages, production, ownership, and distribution, you do not just change the economy. You change the behavior of everyone living inside it. You change what gets rewarded. You change what gets punished. You change what becomes rational. Under a healthy market system, the butcher, the baker, the driver, the coder, the teacher, the builder, all respond to signals. If people want more of something, the reward for providing it rises. If demand falls, producers shift. If costs rise, prices send a warning. If a product is bad, customers leave. If a business wastes resources, it pays a price. None of this is perfect. Markets can be unfair, harsh, and messy, but they contain feedback, they correct, they punish waste, and reward value, at least more reliably than political command ever has. Socialism tries to replace this living system with decisions from above. It assumes that enough intelligence, enough planning, enough paperwork, enough committees, enough orders, enough data, enough moral certainty can do what millions of individuals do on their own through voluntary exchange. That assumption is where the trouble begins, because real economies are too large, too fast, and too personal to be managed like a single machine. They are made of billions of choices that change every hour. What people want changes, what people need changes, weather changes, technology changes, local conditions change, costs change, preferences change, supply changes. Human beings are not pieces on a board. They react, they adapt, they hide, they resist, they take shortcuts, they protect themselves. And once a system starts punishing honesty and effort, people do what people have always done. They stop giving their best, they do the minimum, they work around the rules. They save their energy for survival instead of progress. This is one of the biggest truths that supporters of socialism often underestimate. They talk about how people should behave in a fair system, but economies are not built on how people should behave. They are built on how people actually behave. If the reward for working harder disappears, fewer people will work harder. If the reward for taking risk disappears, fewer people will take risk. If the reward for building something useful disappears, fewer useful things get built. If a farmer knows the extra crop will be taken, why grow extra? If a factory manager knows better performance changes nothing, why improve? If an inventor knows success brings no upside, why bother? If the lazy and the productive are treated the same, you do not get equality and excellence. You get equality and decline. And that is not an insult. It is not cynicism. It is not hatred of the poor. It is not greed. It is simply the logic of incentives. People respond to the rules around them. Change the rules, and you change the outcome. This is why so many centrally controlled economies end up with a strange combination of official optimism and private despair. Publicly, the slogans remain beautiful. Publicly, the promises stay noble. Publicly, the government announces plans, targets, missions, campaigns, victories, reforms, and progress. But privately, the people know what daily life feels like. They know what is missing from shelves. They know how many favors are needed to get basic things done. They know what has to be whispered, hidden, traded quietly, or bought unofficially. They know which official numbers no one really believes. And this gap between official story and lived reality becomes one of the defining features of socialist systems. They promise dignity, but force dependency. They promise fairness, but create privilege for the connected. They promise equality, but produce a ruling class that lives above the rules. And this is another point that matters deeply. Socialism does not eliminate elite power. It changes who the elite are. Instead of business owners competing in the market, you get political managers, party insiders, top officials, planners, and loyal gatekeepers controlling access to jobs, housing, permits, goods, travel, and opportunity. The old rich may lose power, but a new class rises in their place. And unlike market elites, this class often cannot be voted out by customers because it is protected by the state itself. In capitalism, if a business fails to serve people, it can lose money, lose market share, or go bankrupt. In socialism, if an official fails, they may still keep power so long as they protect the political line. This is why corruption becomes so natural in heavily controlled economies. When the state controls too much, access becomes everything. And when access becomes everything, people start trading favors instead of value. Licenses, permits, approvals, housing, supply, movement, contracts, jobs, foreign currency, medicine, all of it becomes political. You no longer ask who serves people best. You ask who knows the right person. That is a terrible way to run a society because it teaches people that loyalty matters more than usefulness, compliance matters more than creativity, and silence matters more than truth. And once those lessons sink in, the damage goes beyond economics. It enters culture. It enters character. It enters the way people speak, trust, and plan. A society cannot stay healthy when honesty becomes dangerous and dependency becomes normal. Now, think about prices, because prices are treated as cold numbers, but they are much more than that. A price is a signal. It is information. It tells producers what is scarce, what is wanted, what is costly, what is urgent. When governments try to force prices lower than reality, maybe to make food, fuel, rent, or goods seem affordable, the political announcement sounds compassionate. But the shelf does not listen to compassion. The farm does not listen to speeches. The delivery truck does not run on good intentions. If you force the price too low, producers stop producing, sellers stop selling, or quality drops. Then the shortage starts. Then rationing starts. Then the black market starts. Then the poor, the very people the policy claimed to protect, suffer the most. The wealthy can often find a way around the shortage. They know people, they have savings, they can travel, they can buy unofficially. But the ordinary person stands in line. The ordinary person deals with empty shelves. The ordinary person gets trapped in the system exactly because they are not powerful enough to escape it. This is one of the cruel ironies of economic control. Policies meant to help the weak often end up hurting the weak first and hardest. And this is not only about food. The same pattern can hit housing. AP rents too hard, and fewer homes get built or maintained. The same pattern can hit energy. Cap prices too hard, and supply weakens or investment dries up. The same pattern can hit labor. Regulate too rigidly and hiring falls, especially for the young, the unskilled, and the poor. Once again, none of this means markets are perfect. It means reality has trade-offs, and socialism often pretends those trade-offs can be wished away by force. They cannot. The bill always arrives, sometimes slowly, sometimes suddenly, but always eventually. Another thing people miss is how much economic growth depends on trust in the future. Growth is not just money moving around today. It is also sacrifice for tomorrow. It is building factories that may take years to pay off. It is spending long nights learning a skill. It is saving money. It is starting a business. It is planting more than you need now because you expect a future return. All of this depends on trust. Trust that what you build will not simply be taken. Trust that success will not be punished. Trust that rules will stay stable enough for planning. Trust that effort has meaning. But socialism weakens that trust because it always carries the shadow of confiscation and control. Even when the rhetoric sounds generous, the message beneath it is clear. What you own is conditional. What you earn is negotiable. What you build can be redefined as belonging to the collective. That uncertainty poisons long-term thinking. Why invest if ownership is fragile? Why save if inflation will destroy value? Why expand if growth only attracts political attention? Why succeed too visibly if success itself becomes suspicious? This is how productive energy starts retreating, quietly at first, then all at once. The result is not only slower growth, it is a shrinking spirit of enterprise. A country can have talented people, hardworking people, educated people, brave people, and still fall behind if the system around them punishes initiative. That is why the tragedy of failed socialist states is not that their people were incapable. Usually the opposite is true. Their people were capable enough to survive despite bad systems. Imagine what they could have built in better ones. Look at how often migrants from collapsed or controlled economies thrive the moment they enter freer markets. The talent was always there. The energy was always there. The ambition was always there. What was missing was freedom to turn effort into reward. This is also why defenders of socialism so often change the argument when history gets uncomfortable. First, they say, real socialism has not been tried. Then, when it has clearly been tried, they say the failures were caused by outside enemies. Then, when that is not enough, they say those countries were not socialist in the right way. Then, when even that fails, they switch from outcomes to intentions. They stop talking about results and start talking about ideals. But people do not live inside ideals. They live inside systems. If a bridge collapses every time it is built, you do not keep praising the dream of the bridge while dismissing the bodies below. At some point, you admit the design is the problem, and that is what critics of socialism have been saying for more than a century. The design is flawed, not because fairness is wrong, not because helping the poor is wrong, not because healthcare, education, or safety nets are wrong. Those are separate questions. A society can care for the weak without abolishing the market. A country can provide support without crushing incentives. A government can regulate abuse without trying to command the whole economy. These are not the same thing, and that distinction matters because One of the most dishonest tricks in political debate is to act as if criticism of socialism means defense of every abuse of capitalism. It does not. You can believe monopolies are harmful. You can believe cronyism is corrupt. You can believe workers deserve dignity. You can believe healthcare should be more affordable. You can believe concentrated corporate power is dangerous, and still understand that socialism as an economic structure creates deeper and more destructive problems. In fact, one reason socialism stays attractive is because it feeds on real failures in capitalist societies. When markets are distorted by favoritism, when governments protect insiders, when ordinary people feel left behind, when housing, healthcare, and education become harder to afford, socialism gains emotional power because it points to real pain. But diagnosing pain is not the same as offering a cure. A bad doctor can correctly identify suffering and still prescribe poison. That is what makes this so dangerous. Socialism sounds humane precisely because it speaks to injustice. But when it tries to solve injustice by weakening prices, property, competition, and incentives, it attacks the very mechanisms that make production, adaptation, and rising living standards possible. It promises relief and delivers dependency. It promises control, but it brings slowdown. It promises justice, but it often ends in shortages and special treatment for the powerful. The real problem is that an economy is not just about making things, it is about discovering what works. In a free market, people try new ideas, some fail, some succeed, and prices help show what people truly need. That constant trial and error helps the system learn and improve. But central planning cannot copy that process because no small group can know what millions of people need at the right time and in the right amount. When reward is cut off from effort, innovation slows, risk-taking falls, and progress suffers. Then control grows, and when control grows, freedom usually shrinks with it. A country cannot keep sharing wealth if it stops creating wealth in the first place. And that is why systems that ignore incentives, prices, and human nature keep moving toward decline instead of prosperity. It promises justice, but often brings shortages. The real problem is simple. An economy works by discovering what people need. In a free market, prices guide that process. In central planning, that signal is lost. When effort brings no reward, innovation slows and progress suffers. A country cannot keep sharing wealth if it stops creating it. If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe to Fiscoria.